Good afternoon and welcome everyone to our 2024 All Hands meeting. Our theme today is saving our democracy with good reason. Our nation is fractured, our democracy is on the brink of collapse and in danger of falling into fascist hands. If you've ever wondered how our nation could fall under the sway of an authoritarian leader, you are witnessing a brazen attempt by an indicted former president who should be in prison and his enablers to steal the reins of power. Today's meeting will attempt to address some of the work that must be done locally, statewide, and nationally to defend our most hallowed principles. Let's talk about our agenda. We're going to start off our meeting with District Attorney Larry Krasner updating us on his elected seat, from right-wing efforts to undercut his authority and how this is part of a greater nationwide attempt by fascists to thwart the will of the people. Then we're going to talk about the work we will be doing in the field this summer to build trust in low engagement neighborhoods. And each of our working groups will tell us about their current projects in education, in housing, climate justice, economic and prison justice, and more. Then we'll hear from our friends, Council Member Kendra Brooks and State Representative Chris Robb. You'll then have an opportunity to join a breakout session for one of our working groups. In an effort to stay on time, we will give our speakers a 1-minute warning before their time is up. Now, let me introduce Executive Committee Member Tanya Ba, who most of you know as Tiba, to talk about the importance of our work. Tiba?
Thanks, Gloria. You've seen all the good work that Philly NN, or Philly Neighborhood Networks, got into last year, with the opening slides. But every month was filled with action and events that focused on improving the lives of others, both in our city and in our state. But keeping an organization like ours operating takes a lot of work, and much of it comes from the dedicated many of you that have given so much already, knocking doors, making phone calls, and just taking part in actions that have helped us plan events. So we say thank you. Now, of course, volunteerism cannot do it alone, and in order for organizations to stay afloat, we need a team of professional organizers to lead the planning, to run the workshops, and to take on the day-to-day. And of course, we give them our thanks, but we actually have to give them more than that. We actually have to give them pay. So some of you that have already donated to PNN, we want to thank you again, but we are still far from meeting our fundraising goals for what will be a very consequential year for our city and for our state, and actually for our country. So today you're going to hear all about the work that will take you and all of us together to strengthen our city, protect our democracy, and safeguard our state. Please think about what you really could afford to give and then double it. So there's going to be a link in the chat. You'll see a PNN link. Take a moment to click on it and donate whatever you can. And I'm very happy to introduce our keynote speaker. He's someone that you know, someone that you've supported, and someone who has been overwhelmingly reelected to serve in Philadelphia's district attorney, my friend, Larry Krasner.
Thank you all. Are you able to hear me? Awesome. Well, I will do my very best to abide by the timing deadlines here. I just got back, pardon the appearance, but I just got back from the airport, and that's because I was in Boston recruiting lawyers for our office. And I will tell you that when we talk to law students, they want to know all about democracy. They want to know all about what is happening. They're deeply concerned, at least the ones who are not members of the Federalist Society, the group that has polluted our Supreme Court with nuts. They want to know what can be done to save it. And that is encouraging because I know there's a lot of young people out there who just flat out aren't going to vote. The role that neighborhood networks can play in getting out those reluctant voters. And let's be honest, the mainstream Democratic Party is not so good at that, but getting out Black, brown, young, progressive, liberal voters, all of us who are constantly having sand kicked in our face by the mainstream party is crucial. And I want you to know that I will do anything I can to support that, and not just because it affects my office and not just because it affects me, but because it affects all of us. I feel really strongly about this for a lot of reasons, but I do want to recommend for all of you, because I know you're serious thinkers on these topics, and I know you're going to be communicating with people. I want to recommend for all of you 2 books that I think really make clear what's going on. The first one is called The Tyranny of the Minority, which was done by a couple political scientists, New York Times bestseller a while back, which really explains the historical roots of why it is that Democrats have to win enormously to even win at all. And I think it provides some valuable insight, such as when they overturned women's right of choice, they did so with 3 justices of the Supreme Court who shouldn't be there. Because Democrats have won 5 of the last 6 presidential elections, and presidents appoint justices of the Supreme Court. But because no matter what the popular vote was, we ended up with, rather than 5 Democratic presidents, 3 Democratic presidents. We have 3 people on the Supreme Court who shouldn't be there in a place where democracy is actually 1 vote counting equally. So I really recommend Tyranny of the Minority. And then the other one, which is entertaining and frightening, is Prequel by Rachel Maddow. My dad served in World War II, and he was much older when I was born than most dads. He was 45. And so as I grew up, I knew old people stuff about the rise of Nazism. He was from his parents were immigrants from the Ukraine. They were Jewish immigrants. They dealt with pogroms and so on. I highly recommend this book to you because it will make you justifiably frightened, and it will make you justifiably knowledgeable about a lot of stuff that I never even heard. But anyway, let me keep it moving. So the nuts and bolts of what's happening with Act 40, which is a small part of your discussion today, are that the legislature, with way too much help from some of our friends, the legislature passed a bill that basically says, unlike every other county, the most diverse, largest, most urban, most democratic county doesn't really get its DA. What's going to happen is, and this was signed by the governor, what's going to happen is, if they have their way, there will be an unelected appointed district attorney who can take away a ton of cases from the DA. And no, it is not concurrent jurisdiction where I can do it and they can do it. It is superseding jurisdiction. I know the governor's been vigorous and misleading everybody about that, but it's a damn lie. The truth is, he can snatch away and pick cases. And by he, I mean an appointed special prosecutor. So I guess it might be a she. They can snatch away the cases they want. So if I'm prosecuting a police officer for homicide, they can snatch it away and drop it. If I'm trying to prosecute people who are suffering from addiction in a way that they don't like, they can snatch it away and go for the max. It's a real problem. It would be less of a problem if they did it statewide. At least it would be stupid equal treatment where everybody's votes are getting erased, but it is very clear what they're doing. The only votes that they are interested in erasing are the votes in the city of Philadelphia. Its application in the surrounding counties, so we are clear before we hear more misleading commentary, is that in all of those counties, the DAs can say no. In Philadelphia, I have to say yes. I have no choice, okay? So anybody who wants to tell you that this is somehow helping, nonsense. Anybody wants to tell you that this is not discriminatory, nonsense. This is a straight up disenfranchisement of 155,102 votes who picked a DA, and that DA should have co-equal powers with all the other DAs in the state. That unfortunately follows a pattern, and I don't want to bore you with it, but it follows a pattern of what we are seeing happening to, progressive or reform prosecutors in Florida, in Georgia, in California. I could go on and on. We are winning some of these fights. We are not winning all of these fights, and we should be winning all of these fights. Make no mistake that if they are successful in their effort to treat Philadelphia and its votes differently, they could pass a law that says there will be a specially appointed mayor. There will be a specially appointed council. There will be a specially appointed, I'm sure you get the picture. We could end up in a situation where Philadelphia is in fact a colony of the rest of the state, and it will be rural, urban, it'll be rural and suburban people whose votes count. I'm not going to mince words here. Some people who are Democrats were involved in this, and that is a shameful part of this story. And some of those votes were obtained by claiming that the appointed Attorney General, Michelle Henry, would declare it unconstitutional as part of a big budget package. Well, guess what? She didn't. So even within the Democratic Party, they're dropping lies to play this shenanigan. And it's important. It's not important because of me. I view myself very specifically as nothing but a lawyer for a movement. And I mean that. And I'm an old guy, and there's other stuff I can do. But it is deeply important because we have had hundreds of years of the disenfranchisement of Black and brown votes. We have had hundreds of years of rich people stepping on the necks of poor people. And we cannot tolerate this here, especially when it is clearly a deliberate aspect of a national effort to have this be our last real election, and to have a minority party that controls this country remain in power despite the demographic changes that would otherwise obliterate that. So, I don't want to go on and on because I know the work that needs to be done here is incredibly important. Count me in. Let me know what I can do. Let me know everything that I can do. And Tanya, I love your cat behind you. That's an awesome cat. But let me know whatever I can do because I want to be in this fight with you every step of the way. I want to do anything that I can to be supportive. And I truly and deeply appreciate everything that you've done.
Thank you, Larry. Now we'll have an opportunity for Larry to answer some of the questions that you've put in the chat. Please feel free to keep putting questions in the chat. Here's our chat monitor, committee person Yvette Young, to present those questions. Yvette?
Good afternoon, everyone. So, Larry, the first question that I have for you is from Tim, and it's, do you expect that there's going to be trouble from the far right protagonists in this fall? And I just want to add to Tim's question because Jeffrey Yass has actually put forward quite a bit of money to bail Donald Trump out of his mess. How do you envision that the far right responding to us this fall?
Thank you for that question. It's a great question. I can tell you this. The Philadelphia DA's office has a nonpartisan election protection unit. Historically, it usually would jump up on election day. That was before we started all the mail-in voting. And then it jumped up when the mail-in voting jumped up, but really it only looked like NASA headquarters on election day. Where we are right now is that I think everyone perceives a much bigger threat this year because Donald Trump specifically said, come to Pennsylvania. And therefore, my office has already met with federal law enforcement, which we often do, but we've met early with them. We've asked them to work diligently and in a bigger way with us from the very beginning. Federal law enforcement is agreeable to that. They are responding. This is my assistant, by the way. And and we are on it. And we are deeply, deeply concerned about this. Simply put, I intend to do everything within my power to step on the neck of any effort to frighten voters. I don't care who they're voting for. And last election, the last presidential election, we had some people coming up from Virginia with an AR-15, 180 or so rounds of ammunition, guns on their hips to go to the convention center where votes were being counted. That was a time when I received a call from the FBI. Philadelphia police were ready. They were caught and they were eventually convicted for a bunch of offenses. But it could get bigger. It could be worse. And I think collectively there has to be a very loud warning going out that anyone who's going to try this kind of activity is going to be in deep trouble. I intend to go after it any way I possibly can.
Thank you for that, Larry. There is another question from Jason Massey, and his question is, how is Act 40 being funded? And does this funding affect your efforts to recruit assistant DAs?
Great question. So this is another enormous threat with Act 40, and I am sad to tell you that for whatever reason, probably Republican pressure for the Philly budget, that the mayor who, our mayor, and I'm trying to work as best I can, and I'm hopeful with our mayor, but the city has made a decision not to legally challenge the part of Act 40 that says, this, how shall I put it, this unelected ghost prosecutor, and who knows how many ghost assistant prosecutors gets paid for out of city money. Once again, is Philadelphia a colony? Are we going to have a situation where the votes are erased, but they will take our taxes? I think they call it taxation without representation. We are in court. We have filed an injunction to try to stop the appointment of a special prosecutor, and we will be pursuing it vigorously. But I am sad to report that, I hoped the city would also sue, because once again, this is a very, very dangerous precedent. Imagine a world where the state can come in and snatch the city's local taxes to use them for their purpose. This is not a state legislature that is without Trumpies. This is not a state legislature that has ever treated Philadelphia well, with the exception of our Philadelphia delegation, many of whom are wonderful. So it's a real concern. Is it affecting my recruiting? No, it's not affecting my recruiting.
Thank you again. We have another question from Stan Shapiro. And that question is, do you think we should start a campaign to amend the Home Rule Act to really protect local power in a way that it does not now?
That is a great question that I cannot answer because I don't consider myself an expert in the type of law that would cover all of that. But if there's an interest, we absolutely can try to get in touch with some of our excellent Democratic allies. Senator Costa has been a real ally. Some of the lawyers who work with them, I think they're probably more expert in the ins and outs of governmental funding and governmental power and what might shore that up. I think, though, we have to be real. This is an assault on democracy. This is an assault on Philadelphia. And we have to do everything we can to fight it back.
I have a question on compensation for those who have been wrongfully convicted of crimes in Philadelphia. Is that something that the district attorney could assist in writing or building in Philadelphia to help those who have been improperly convicted and then exonerated?
Thank you for that question. So it's something I've been trying to assist with for 5 years. The former chief of our conviction integrity unit, a woman named Patricia Cummings, comes from Texas. And probably the most interesting version of how that gets done well is from Texas. So I went to the solicitor, city solicitor, back when it was Marcel Pratt, and we were trying to deal with the Kennedy administration. It hasn't happened yet, but I will tell you, we started to get interest from the prior solicitor in the last year. The way that works is this. Right now, I mean, first of all, people getting compensation should be innocent. It's not supposed to be that you were guilty, but you didn't have a fair trial so that you get all kinds of money. It's, under the law, it's supposed to be that you didn't do it, and that's why you sat in jail. There's a little bit of a wrinkle to that, but I would say 85% of the people who have had their convictions lifted are truly innocent. But when it comes to people whose lives have been wrecked, let's say a Curtis Crossland or somebody like that, who, went to jail with 5 kids at home, getting an education, working a job, living with the mother of the kids, didn't do the crime. Somebody like that should get compensation. What they have to do now is they have to wait a few years while some, good lawyers file a Section 1983 lawsuit. They may get millions later. Probably close to 40%, if not more, of those millions may go to that lawyer who didn't do any of that time. So what is going on in Texas, and I would love to see in Philadelphia, and we would love to have your support, is that they offer essentially the same money up front right away, but you take out the lawyer's fees. So it might be, based on the amount of time you spent in jail or some other factors, it might be 60% of what you would get later, which helps the taxpayer, and it would be immediate, which helps the person coming out of jail, and the risk of losing the case would be eliminated, which helps the person coming out of jail. I'm a lawyer. I got nothing against lawyers, but the more important thing is that people can start their lives up again when they come out, that they don't have to wait 3 or 4 years for this, while simultaneously not taking their rights. So what they do in Texas, they say, look, you can have this upfront money, or you can sue, whichever you want. You make your choice. And a lot of people do take the upfront money because, their bottom line is the same at the end, and they can have it now instead of in 3 years. And as I said, good thing for the taxpayer as well. You should know it's, we don't make any money off this, obviously. We try to get innocent people out of jail or people who were robbed of a fair trial. We try to do all this kind of stuff. And, you know, there's a lot of pushback from people in the city who are trying to shut us down because it costs them money. Well, if it actually cost them a little bit less money, but the victims of this were compensated just as well, there might be less internal pushback against what we're trying to do, which lets us do justice. So we would love to work on that with anyone who wants to.
Larry, thank you for that, especially for those parents that have mortgaged their houses to help, fight for their children who they knew were innocent, to at least give them some compensation. The next question is from Jason Massey, and that is, what things are you looking to get or to acquire in the new city budget for your department?
Well, we are, first of all, we are looking not to have our budget slashed. Sometimes when there's a change of leadership, that can happen. Second, we are trying to work on some of the initiatives that seem to be most concerning to people right now. You know, the good news is that all categories of violent crime that are on the Philadelphia Police Department database are down. Some of them down very substantially, 30% or more, with the exception of one. And that category is assault with no weapon, essentially. That's only up 1%. So we're seeing real declines in violent crime for the third straight year, especially in homicides. Homicides are down more than 30%. We are also seeing real declines in property crime. You know, but there are a couple of categories that are bad. Car thefts are still bad, and that has a lot to do with Hyundai and Kia having cars that are easy to steal, as TikTok has instructed young people. And then, of course, there's a lot going on with organized retail theft. And what I mean by that is the internet has become a tremendous marketplace for fencing stolen goods. There is a level of sophistication to this. The feds actually recently busted some pawn shops that were involved in some hardcore fencing and grabbed $15 million in a Swiss bank account. So we're not here talking about, you know, addicted, mentally ill people who are unhoused who are stealing. That presents separate issues. We're talking about people who have none of those features, but are actually very, very organized. They have warehouses. They have the ability to market all kinds of stolen goods on the internet. So, you know, on the enforcement end, those are some of the issues. I am happy to report that the mayor in her budget address talked about how she has $45 million for the state-of-the-art forensics lab that this city truly has needed for more than 15 years, that would solve a lot of crimes that are not solved now. And obviously we all want to see more shootings solved. And B, it would make sure innocent people don't go to jail, because the quality of the evidence would be so much higher. So I'm happy to see that happening, but that's not my money. That's more money for the police department, who are the ones who have it. You know, there's a lot that we're trying to do on the prevention side, on the restorative justice side. We have set up an approach to try to deal not only with juveniles, for whom we have a lot more programming than we used to have by way of diversion, but we're also trying to deal with people between 18 and 25, people who, according to the U.S. Supreme Court, are not fully developed mentally. They're more capable of rehabilitation. And that requires hardcore programming, funding for that programming. So we're trying to work on that. And then finally, needless to say, we are all a little concerned about what can be done positively. And I do think there are a lot of positive things that can be done about Kensington. And we're also concerned at the possibility that the city is going to go in reverse and repeat mistakes that were made 30 years ago, 40 years ago, 60 years ago. And none of us want to see that. So we want to see things that will be effective and will save lives and will stop the spread of disease, not some sort of, how shall I put it, Rudy Giuliani approach to all these things. So those are some of our priorities, but I'm happy to give more details once we have finalized some documentation.
Larry, thank you so much. We appreciate your coming to us and sharing this information. We have a few more questions but no time to ask them. So I hope it's okay if we email them to you and you can email responses, and we will then share them with everyone who's here.
Yes, thank you so much, Gloria. Thank you, Tim. I really appreciate all of you. Thanks.
Okay, take care. Okay, now we're going to hear from our organizer, Tim Brown, about our electoral and immersive work. Tim.
Thanks, Gloria. I'm sure that at least once in your life, you've heard the question, what would you have done if you were alive during the time of Hitler and the Nazis? This used to be an academic exercise, something uttered at a bar, a safe debate about the impossible. And yet here we are, finding ourselves having to seriously answer this question. Well, the names have changed, but their intent is the same. A greedy, debased monster, in order to avoid life in prison, is leading a plot to overthrow our democracy. He's being aided and abetted by craven politicians, greedy billionaires, and far right religious authoritarians and foreign governments. If the unthinkable happens and we lose this election, the safety and freedoms we've come to take as a right will be stripped from us. And we will face the very real possibility that millions of us will need to flee the only nation we've ever known to avoid being rounded up. With this very real threat looming over us, we need to decide what we can do ourselves to get ourselves out of this mess. Fortunately, there's an answer. While Philadelphia is a deeply blue city whose candidates are not in danger in November, we do play a key role in Pennsylvania for the upcoming presidential election. And here's why. Philly is a sleeping giant. 1 in 5 Pennsylvania Democrats lives in our city, but we regularly vote 5 to 11 percentage points behind the rest of the state in turnout every single election. Now, our goal is to significantly increase our turnout to counter those MAGA voters in other parts of the state. And we'll do this by turning our attention to those who live in underserved neighborhoods and who, unsurprisingly, don't bother to vote. And this is important. We know where they live. Now, these communities registered and turned out in large numbers for Barack Obama in 2008 and 2012, but they dropped off in 2016 with the result that Hillary Clinton lost the state by 42,000 votes. And Biden won by the uncomfortably slim margin of only 80,000 votes. If we're to win Pennsylvania, we need to boost both voter registration and turnout in these key neighborhoods. So how do we do this? Now, too many times, political parties and candidates, in their eagerness to get out the vote, ignore low propensity voters because they have limited time to run their election campaigns. So they focus on reliable voters to get their candidate to win on election day, which makes sense for them. Then they go their separate ways, leaving nothing in their wake but unread mailers and lawn signs. Meanwhile, the folks who haven't been voting regularly get ignored more and more until they're irrelevant to the process. And this is where we will go this summer. By immersing ourselves in these neglected communities, our intent is to earn their trust and to bring some hope to counter the hopelessness that has kept folks home too many times on election day. Our initial nonpartisan work will combine canvassing with community-centered tactics, including voter registration and assistance with mail-in ballots. While we can find low turnout voters because they're in the system, we know there's no easy way to identify unregistered voters. So we're going to do everything we can to bring them to us by creating creative opportunities for positive engagement. We'll be working with elected officials on their C3 community events like job fairs and children's book events. We'll be flyering at the doors to herald these events in the neighborhoods, and we'll staff a resources tent to help people apply for needy resources. And while we're at it, we'll validate their voter registration and help them with their mail-in ballot applications. We're also going to work with neighbors on projects including music fests, movie nights, block cleanups, community gardens, and cookouts. We'll partner with our local neighborhoods to help plan and staff the events, and we'll have workshops to help train leaders. We'll also encourage neighbors to participate in one of our working groups around education, housing, climate, economic justice. It has been our experience that if someone devotes time to an issue, they're more likely to exercise their right to vote. You're going to hear directly from those working groups in a moment. Now, we'll flyer and canvass regularly with positive messaging about Joe Biden and useful local information, and we'll engage neighbors in meaningful conversations around shared concerns. We'll also push our content across Facebook's X, Instagram, and YouTube. And our veteran canvassers will use the buddy canvas method to train new activists on how to have a meaningful conversation with their neighbors and how to use the technology. And this will prepare them to mentor others so we can start building capacity, start building local teams. Our goal is to reach out to 100,000 voters by Labor Day, using the tactics I just mentioned, identifying local leaders and working with them to build teams of trained activists in their neighborhoods. So, Right after Labor Day, we will pivot to electoral work with our allies to bring together thousands of voters in rallies to defend democracy. Using the goodwill that we earned during a summer of immersive work, we'll organize with community leaders and their teams to begin a persuasion and mobilization campaign for the general election. This will include a full canvass of our target neighborhoods. We'll use the information gathered during the summer to locate and register new voters, help them apply for and complete their mail-in ballots, and provide convincing messaging that resonates with them with what they told us at the doors and at events during the summer. The work we do this summer will establish the foundation for our vision to create a reliable turnout in Philadelphia that we can have such an outsized and positive influence on Pennsylvania's selection for president, and that our democracy is protected for the foreseeable future. Now, this work will start in mid-May, and I invite each of you to sign up to join us in this immersive work. You can find yourself working in a community event one week, helping teach a new activist how to have effective conversations at the doors the next. Maybe the third week, you'd be helping to plan a movie night on a shared concern. Our goal is to light a fire under those who would otherwise sit out this election, falsely believing that it doesn't matter who wins. To be clear, there's no do-over for this November. This is it. If you ever wondered what you do to stop a fascist takeover, now's the time to find out. You can't do everything, but you can do something. So use the link that Margaret's putting in the chat right now to do your part. Now, before we get to November, we've got a primary election to support our endorsed candidates for president, Senate, Attorney General, Auditor General, and State Treasurer. Most of our endorsed candidates are running unopposed, except for Cass Green, who we're supporting in HD10. But now I'd like to take a moment to introduce someone who's been working, a PNN ally for years. He's been working with us, and he's likely to be he will be the next state representative for HD 201, and that is Andre Carroll. Andre?
Hey, Tim. Thank you for that introduction. Appreciate you. Good afternoon, Neighborhood Networks. It's an honor to be before you today. My name is Andre Carroll. I am slated right now to be the next state representative in House District 201. I just want to give a great shout out to T-Ba, I see you there, who lives in the district, and thank you for all of your support. And I want to thank Neighborhood Networks for all that you do for candidates. Running for office is not the easiest thing. But this is my second time running for this seat. I ran for the seat in 2022 and had the opportunity to have your support, and I'm appreciative to have your support the second time around. And also, congratulations to Neighborhood Networks for 20 years of organizing and your 20th anniversary. So I want to mention that too.
Great. Thank you, Andre. And now to introduce our working groups is the man who, there we go. This is sorry. Now to introduce our working groups is the man who was only about 400 votes shy of becoming our 8th district council member, and we're proud to have him as a member of our steering committee, Seth Anderson Oberman.
Thank you, Tim. Good afternoon, everybody. I've got a couple assistants myself who I gotta keep from walking all over my keyboard here. It's a real joy to be with you this afternoon. And thank you so much for, kind of putting into perspective the work that's ahead of us. As you guys know, the work that we do at Philly Neighborhood Networks doesn't happen in a bubble. Much of our work is in coordination with allies because we know that there's strength in numbers. Coalition building is very important for our work. And as we prepare for a summer of work with those allies and strengthening and growing our coalition, today we're going to hear a little bit about each of our current working groups and their plans for the year. If folks remember, back in September, we had that organizing summit at GLEC, and we had some groups come together, and they've been working together since. I would like, as folks are talking and reporting back, you can sign up for one or more of the working groups by clicking the link in the chat. So Tim's going to put that in the chat. And you can also join a working group in their breakout at the conclusion of the all hands meeting. So when we wrap up, the working groups are going to meet. You can pick which one you want to join, and to continue our great work in these areas. We've got an education working group, a climate justice working group, a housing working group, a community development working group, an economic working group, a prison justice working group, PA Blue working group, an Overturn Act 40 campaign, and a social media working group. So that's a lot of work that folks are engaged in, and you'll have your choice to choose which one you want to jump in at the end at the conclusion of the all hands meeting. So thank you. With that, I'd like to introduce Bo to talk about the education working group.
Thank you, Seth. One of our education working group's long-term goals is to obtain fair funding for Pennsylvania schools, in particular Philadelphia. The wealthiest PA districts spend about a third more on each student than the poorest districts, and Philly's district ranks 232nd in per student spending out of 499 districts in the state. We're also fighting the privatization of public education, particularly when it comes to charter schools, school vouchers, and educational tax credits. Charter schools are entrenched in Philly, that's a fact, but we want to stop their expansion because they drain resources from all the other schools. Right now, families with incomes over $150,000 can receive state educational scholarships, and charter schools can skim off 20% of their state revenues for admin costs, about double the percentage that other schools charge. And educational tax credits increased by $150 million last year, while the Level Up program, which gives extra money to the neediest districts, received nothing. Our Blue Pennsylvania team, led by the tireless Coleman Poses, has worked with State Rep. Joe Cerisi's office to craft House Bill 2063, which guarantees that at least 90% of taxpayer funding will go to only towards scholarships for students whose families live at less than 200% of the federal poverty level. Now it can go up to 500%. And it limits the amount of state dollars charter schools can skim for overhead. We've created a letter writing form that reaches out to all members of the state assembly by demanding they support this legislation. And you'll find the link in the chat, which I'll put in any moment. With the input of Council Member Kendra Brooks's office, we're also preparing a letter writing campaign asking City Council to deny the appointment of any school board candidate who's in favor of creating new charter schools. Look for that in our next week's newsletter. If you want to help in our work, sign up and please join us in our breakout at the end of our all hands meeting. And now I'd like to introduce our climate justice group led by our climate champion, Maurice Sampson.
Thank you, Bo. This is Maurice Sampson. I am a member of the steering committee. I chair the environment committee, and in my day job, I work for Clean Water Action. We have been in PNN, been featuring environmental issues since 2014. Currently, our involvement really covers two venues. The second Sunday of every month, we meet at the Germantown Friends School for an in-person meeting where we talk about climate justice issues. And by that, I mean the work we're talking about is community-based activity. We also, for a very long time, have the Environment Committee, which is focused on issues that are related to policy. And that group meets every Wednesday at 4 o'clock. We have a standing meeting, discuss those issues. We have been working on the plastic bag ban that everyone has heard about, is a product of a lot of years' work that involved PNN. We are currently working to correct some inequities in that legislation with the Bring Your Own Bag campaign that would actually put a fee on the paper bags. And if you want a more of understanding how that works, please join us later for further discussion. We also work with the Weaver's Way Plastic Reduction Task Force and a whole range of interesting projects and activities. Again, I invite you to join us later to hear the details. Through the Climate Justice Group, which directly was created at the People's Summit earlier this year, we took up, we identified a number of issues we were concerned about, and then two of us ready to take the mantle on leading them, we decided to work on planting more trees in the northwest part of the city, as well as dealing with the second largest, most important issue by public demand, and that is all the dumping that is going on around the city. In fact, on this coming Tuesday at City Hall, we will be doing a rally in order to press the Parker administration into creating convenience centers, places where people with less than a ton of material that they might dump in a park, on a street in your backyard, to bring it to one of the 12 sanitation yards that are here in the city. The way we work is this: if you didn't hear an issue of environment that you are concerned with, and you're willing to help provide the leadership, we will help you make all the necessary connections that you need to make. We will help you to recruit people, but you provide the leadership on those issues. I'm very proud to say when you come to our working group, there are 4 people who will be speaking there, because we have people working on each of these issues. So that's where we are. We are very proud and pleased of the work that we are doing. If you are interested in any of these, please sign up in the chat and pick the Climate Justice Group for the breakout, and join us at the end of the program. I want to thank you so much for this opportunity to talk to you, and we'll see you later. And meantime, let me introduce you to Craig Stevens, who will talk to you about housing.
Hello, everybody. Am I on the screen?
Yep.
Here I am. Yeah, my name is Craig Stevens. I'm the facilitator of the Housing Justice Working Group that was formed out of the People's Summit in September 2023. We held a joint Zoom meeting with the Community Controlled Development Working Group, which you're going to hear from next. After a lot of good discussion, we decided we needed to identify some more specific organizing targets, and I'm going to run into those now. The Housing Justice Working Group is focusing on 2 main areas. One is mobilizing support for the Philly Coalition for Affordable Communities Housing Justice Campaign. That campaign is launching an effort to get city council legislation passed to pool 50% of available city housing funds to target, to preserve and to create deeply affordable rental housing, targeting households with annual incomes at or below $25,000, who often are left out of most of our so-called affordable housing developments. And that $25,000 is the actual median income, household income in Germantown. So this will be a great program to benefit communities like Germantown. Secondly, on the ground and very much tailored to engaging people in issues and the elections, we aim to build a new Northwest Tenants' Rights and Advocacy Network to provide more of a local place for people to get support for issues they're dealing with in problem properties, with bad landlords, and those needing individual legal assistance that often is hard to obtain without some support. WeMan is offering support for this, but we're engaging tenants who've been active before in this effort. And I hope you'll consider joining us in supporting this, or if you're a tenant, dive in and get involved with us. We need leaders. And in addition, we're going to engage Northwest tenants in city and state legislative campaigns to try to win stronger, effective tenants' rights legislation and an effective system of landlord accountability, not what we have now with L&I and all the rest, as well as aiming in the long run to get rent stabilization established for properties owned by large financial corporations. We need your help to join in these efforts. I hope you'll be a part of this. We aim to be part of a citywide transformative housing justice campaign so we can work locally and citywide. Please join us in the Housing Justice Breakout Room. You'll have the opportunity to click on that room later when they put them up on the screen, but also I encourage you to sign up in the form for our working group. And if you don't, we'll be in touch with you either way. Now here's Colleen Floyd-Carroll to tell us about the Community Center Development Working Group. Well,
Colleen here.
I thought she was. Colleen.
Colleen, you're on mute.
I'm so sorry. I'm talking away here. Excuse me. Excuse me. Hey, I'm Colleen Floyd Carroll. I was the facilitator for the community-centered development group at our People's Summit in September. We covered a lot of concerns at the summit, but largely we're concerned about development that's driven from a market-based process and not connected to community needs. We talked about loss of green space, zoning, transparency or lack thereof, gentrification, tangled title, support for small businesses, and a whole lot of other issues. We want to find ways to tackle the adversarial development process that allows pay-to-play developers, local power brokers, and councilmanic prerogative to run roughshod over our neighborhood and community needs with no accountability, and a lot of by right development. So our first step is to build a cohesive coalition to push forward an agenda for community-centered development with a comprehensive community plan that collaborates with social impact developers who have a track record for this work. We want the city to create a policy, I'm calling it public land for public good, for city-owned land held by entities such as the Redevelopment Authority to plan for and prioritize property sales to those with a demonstrated commitment to social impact development, collaborative approaches to deeply affordable housing development tied to the AMI of local neighborhoods, and who have a history of small business support. We also seek to restrain councilmanic prerogative. It's a tradition, not a law, but a tradition that basically says that council members can be the final arbiter of what's built in their district. This unwritten rule has allowed for pay-to-play developers like KBK to hamstring affordable housing development efforts like turning the Germantown Y into low-income senior housing and shifting that over to projects that are stalled out for decades at a time. So we believe that greater community coalition building and the power associated with a broad coalition citywide, locally, can lead to more equitable, affordable housing development and sensitive to and curated for our local needs. So if you're interested in this work, I hope you'll join us in the link. We're really in a lot of alignment with the housing group, and we've had some overlap there, but we're hoping we can all work together to move this forward. So please join us, use the link in the chat and join us for the breakout at the end of today's meeting. And I'm going to pass you on now to Stan Shapiro, who's going to talk to you about our economic justice work. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much, Colleen. Yes, the whole theme of this event is turning to economic democracy, which is tremendous. And another aspect of that is bringing Philadelphia's money home to Philadelphia. Philly Neighborhood Networks has tried recently to do this by getting the city to create a public bank. Many of you in this room sent emails and texts, visited with council members, and came to council hearings on this subject, and your efforts actually worked. Council did pass a first step bill 2 years ago that could have led to the creation of our very own bank, which is the good news. The bad news, unfortunately, is that Mayor Kenny first and now Mayor Parker have refused to implement the legislation. So how will we fight back? Well, we're going to do it with a 3-part program that will model what a public bank can do while we're waiting for the political courage of our people in City Hall to actually make this public bank a reality. So first, we're asking that the city pension fund managers move at least $8.4 billion, move at least part of its $8.4 billion portfolio from far-flung, often predatory corporations to investments right here at home, where capital is desperately needed for affordable housing, job creation, and environmental protections in BIPOC and poor white communities. Such investments will help the broad community, but also city workers who want to live and work in a functioning city that cares for all. We have a petition up around that plan, and I'm putting it in the chat, and it would be great if all of you could sign that petition so that we can move some of our pension money from Exxon and various other soul-crushing companies and bring that money home. Secondly, in addition to the pension plan move, we're asking churches, schools, businesses, nonprofits, and just regular folks to move their own money from Wall Street banks to smaller, locally focused community banks, credit unions, and community development financial institutions. The third prong is going to be a campaign to get the city of Philadelphia to move at least some of its own money into institutions like the ones I've mentioned that care about Philadelphia and its people. While waiting to build that public bank, let's still get as much city money as we can into pro-people institutions. Separately, we're also deeply involved in efforts to preserve the tax base of the city. The Chamber of Commerce wants to cut business taxes to the bone before entirely eliminating them. We say, not while city services need massive improvement. Stay tuned for updates on that fight. And if you're interested in taking part in this work or other economic justice issues, then please join our economic justice team and hang around for our meeting after the breakout. Now here's Sam Liu of the Abolitionist Law Center to talk about prison justice.
Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for having me. My name is Sam Liu from the Abolitionist Law Center, and my colleague, John Thompson, JT, is a member of PNN's Executive Committee. Last year, PNN joined a coalition of organizations to confront unjust prison conditions, and we are working with allies like Amistad, the Coalition to End Death by Incarceration, and other organizations to expose the abuse and neglect we discovered in our city's prisons and get people out and free. So this year, we intend to push city officials to establish a prison oversight board where none currently exists to address the terrible conditions that have been uncovered, like 23-hour lockdowns, lack of medical care, broken facilities, and prisoner abuse. Since 2020, more than 50 people have died in Philly's jails, and we have to prevent those deaths now. We also plan to demand that city officials divest $1.2 billion from Philly's jails and police and into things we know our communities need, like public schools, parks, libraries, healthcare, and so many of the things that we've already discussed in this meeting today. There's going to be an upcoming budget hearing on prisons and police on April 9th, and we would love for you to join us for that rally and hearing and to demand divestment. We are also working alongside survivors of solitary confinement to introduce statewide legislation to end the cruel practice of solitary confinement in Pennsylvania. We speak to people who have been locked up for 25 years, 19 years, 10 years, decades in solitary and have not seen any of their loved ones face to face and have been locked in a cell no larger than a parking space. We need help with virtually lobbying legislators and having in-person lobbying days in Harrisburg. We'll train you, no experience necessary. Come join us for this important legislation introduction. And lastly, we host an in-person letter writing night in West Philly, an important part of supporting those on the inside and building relationships to resist the carceral system. Our launch of the first in-person letter writing since the pandemic has started will be Thursday, April 11th. And so if you would like to help us with this important work, please use the link in the chat and let us know what you're interested in, and I'll get you connected. And now I will pass it off to Coleman Poses to talk about Blue Pennsylvania.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Coleman Poses of the Blue Pennsylvania Committee of Philly Neighborhood Networks. Our committee has been at the vanguard of the drive to move our state from red to blue in the political spectrum. Last year, we hosted an online forum, Defend Students' Rights, in April, and a live event in August at the Salem Church of Christ in Doylestown, a haven for LGBTQ youth, entitled A Slice of Democracy. Speakers included representatives from such organizations as the Pro-Democracy Women's Association, Red, Wine, and Blue, the Good Government Group, March on Harrisburg, and Dana Foley and Wade Weston, candidates and current board members of the Central Bucks – and Perkiomen Valley school boards, respectively. And our canvassers and phone bankers worked hard to combat the misinformation about the school board candidates in those school districts. As a result of our efforts and those of our allies, both districts flipped from red to blue. Now the challenge of 2024. In the coming months, we will be working to elect Democrats, preferably progressives, at every level of the federal, state, and state government. Canvassing is preferable, but every action is important. There will be ample opportunities for phone banking, postcard and letter writing, as well as texting. Finally, a blue Pennsylvania is nothing without blue legislation. With a Democratic governor and a Democratic House, we have an opportunity to make Pennsylvania a greener, more equitable state. And there is no reason why we can't use our power to force the Republican-controlled state and state Senate to release more funds for public education, public transportation, and to create legislation to make it more difficult for private interests to take over such institutions like our schools and water and sewer systems. If you're interested in learning more about our work, stick around for our workshop and/or sign up on the form link in the chat. And now I'll pass it to T-Ba to tell us about the work we're doing on Act 40. T-Ba.
Thanks, Coleman. So you heard Larry Krasner talk about Act 40 and over 155,000 voters that had their votes canceled. What you didn't hear and what you should know is this wasn't just Republicans. This was also some of our state house Democrats that actually thought that education income tax credits would actually be a fair enough trade to give away to Black and brown bodies in Philadelphia. And as we know, that makes no sense at all. So with friends like that, who needs enemies? So what we've done so far is we've created the Coalition to Defend Democracy. We've identified over 33 sites of engagement, flyered, and tried to push back against the faulty lies that have been pushed out into the news media by our governor around what Act 40 is, does, and needs to do. The bottom line is Act 40 strips the DA of its jurisdiction, and Philadelphia pays for it. And like our DA shared, this is just a precedence for more harm to come. And where will it end? Will it stop with, how they decide who's going to be the mayor and who's going to be able to push forward what legislation in city council? It's just the beginning of what we can expect when we actually don't have the ability to stop some of these incumbents from actually staying in office. So in the meantime, if you're interested in signing up for any of these groups that we've talked about and you want to move forward, feel free to use the link that's found inside chat. And I'd like to introduce Jasmine, our social media guru, and thank you all for being here. Jasmine?
Jasmine, the media coordinator here at PNN. I manage our Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter/X accounts, maintain our website, phillynn.org, and assist with the online components to the projects you've been hearing about from our working groups. In the past year, we have revamped our website to create a more accessible hub for electoral information, events listings, blog posts, and working group activity. Our site activity has increased 86%. First-time visitors to our website have increased by 36%, and views to pages like our weekly newsletter have increased by 67%. We've also reached nearly 2,000 followers on Instagram. In short, we've succeeded in getting the word out about all of PNN's amazing work. In 2024, we're working to create original issue-based social media content to reach new members who may not be familiar with PNN or even previously politically active. We're looking to excite new folks about the importance of local politics and the actions they can take to improve our community. That's why we're planning to host interviews with local guests on Germantown Community Radio at least once a month beginning in June. Each of these shows will highlight a political issue facing Philadelphia and uplift the voice of someone who has taken action in their community. We believe this educational programming will build stronger connections with other activist organizations in Philadelphia and empower listeners to engage with our information sharing at monthly movie nights, where working groups can exhibit a movie or documentary that relates to their work. In order to achieve these goals, we are looking for volunteers with a variety of skill sets. First and foremost, we are looking for people to contribute to our radio programming or curate our movie nights. We are also looking for volunteers willing to take photos and videos at our in-person events. We want to capture the energy of this activism and show people on social media what they're missing. We are also looking for people comfortable using social media for eyes and ears to come. Need folks through our incoming messages, comments, follow requests, partners, posts, make sure we're engaging members and filtering and spam accounts. If any sound interesting to you, voice your interest at the link in the chat. Thank you. I'm going to pass the microphone.
Seth, you're muted.
Dang it. All right. Sorry. Thank you so much, Jasmine. That's really exciting. It's great to see that work that you guys are doing. And I want to thank all the other presenters as well, for the incredible work that the groups are doing. It's really exciting to just, kind of see the breadth of our work across this, across the North and Northwest and across the, neighborhood networks and our movement. So thank you to everybody. We're really excited to have Kathleen Melville join us. And Kathleen is from Kendra's, Councilmember Kendra Brooks's office, and is going to talk a little bit about the state of the city. So I want to give a warm welcome to Kathleen and thank you. And just remind folks also to click on one of those working group links and join us when this wraps up, in the working group of your choice. All right. Thank you, Kathleen. Thank you for joining us.
Yeah, thank you so much, Seth. Really glad to be joining you all, and so sorry that the council member is not able to be here. She had some family issues come up that are preventing her from being with us. But yeah, wanted to say a little bit about how our office in City Hall is sort of thinking about the state of the city right now. I think we can start by saying that there's a lot of things that are making us feel really, really hopeful right now. One of those things is meetings like this. The people in this room and in rooms across our city make up a really powerful progressive coalition. And we have been winning victories that would have been unthinkable 5 years ago. So when I'm in rooms like this, I think about how powerful we are and how powerful we're becoming. For the first time in the history of our city, a third party, the Working Families Party, has more seats on council than the Republicans, and that's because of our work. Councilmember O'Rourke and Councilmember Brooks are working together as a team now, and I can tell you that it makes a real difference in how it feels to be in City Council. It feels a lot more hopeful being there as a team. We also have our state reps. We have State Rep Chris Rabb in Harrisburg, along with State Rep Rick Krajewski, State Rep Elizabeth Fiedler, State Senator Nikhil Saval, and that is a really powerful coalition. And we are very hopeful that it will be growing soon. So there's a lot to be hopeful for. And about, but we also are seeing 3 overlapping crises in our city right now. We have a gun violence crisis, an overdose crisis, and a housing crisis. And these are crises that are really hitting working families hard. We all know people, family members, neighbors, friends who are dealing with 1 or 2 or even all 3 of these crises. Every day in our office, we are getting phone calls from people across the city who are desperate for housing, people who are about to be evicted or who are forced to leave their homes because of really high taxes or because of terrible rental conditions. So these are those are the people that we're thinking about as we're heading into budget negotiations in City Hall. We're thinking about how our city's resources and the decisions that we make are going to affect the day-to-day lives of Philly families. And the good news, if you're looking at the mayor's proposed budget, is that there are some small increases for public services that Philly families depend on. The School District of Philadelphia is getting a 1% increase, and so is the Free Library of Philadelphia. But if you take a closer look at the proposed budget, there's also a lot of cuts. There are cuts to Parks and Rec, cuts to the Streets Department, cuts to mural arts, cuts to the Office of Sustainability, cuts to Planning and Development, which is the office that funds the Philadelphia Eviction Prevention Program. There are cuts to public health, to L&I, to the Department of Labor. So we're talking about a lot of major cuts that will really impact the kinds of services and resources that working families depend on, and that frankly will make it a lot harder for us to make an impact on these, on our gun violence crisis, our overdose crisis, and our housing crisis. So we have a lot of work to do if we want a budget that funds the things that we care about. And I just want to invite you all to get involved in the budget process. You can sign up for public testimony during budget hearings. You can also participate in the People's Budget, which is a project we do with Mural Arts to sort of engage community members and create a people-powered budget. We have a new mayor, a new council president, and several new council members. So now is a really important time for us to show up and make our voices heard. There is a lot of new energy in City Hall, but we are only going to get what we're ready to fight for. And so we in our office are depending on folks like you to really raise your voices and to make yourselves heard and seen. With your budget priorities, I think there's been a feeling in City Hall that during the pandemic, when a lot of the hearings and things were virtual, that it was a little bit harder for progressive community groups to show up in a big way and sort of put pressure on elected officials. And we are back to being 100% in person for all the budget hearings, for all city council sessions. And so I think there's a real opportunity for folks who share our values and want to see, some of these important things funded to make that known, especially with the sort of new group of leaders in City Hall. Thank you, Jason, for popping the link to the People's Budget in the chat. Yeah, and that's all I have. Thank you all so much for having me. Thank you for the chance to kind of share a little bit about what's going on in City Hall.
Thank you so much, Kathleen. Thank you for joining us today. All right, so I think now we're going to move to ask some questions from the chat. Victoria, will you help facilitate those chat questions?
Sure. Thank you so much, Kathleen, for presenting. I think you might have been reading the chat yourself because you definitely answered one of the questions about what can we do to support your work. That was a question from that was a question from Jason, who is killing it today. And kind of a combination of two questions. What can Councilmember Brooks do to build coalition with Democrats in City Council, which Tim asked. And Stan's question is the administration and the council leadership, are they consulting with Kendra and Nick on budget and other policy issues, or ignoring them because they're working family party members? So kind of a combination of what can your office do to try and work with the Democrats in power, and how are the Democrats in power responding to your new coalition?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think that we are working to try to build the coalition larger. You know, being 2 members in city council, a city council body of 17, is a little bit daunting when you need, you know, 9 votes to pass anything significant, you know, to pass any legislation. I think what is helpful from sort of a community standpoint is recognizing that you know, if there's something that you want to see change in our city's laws, that you need nine council members to make that happen, right? And so I think that's an important piece of strategy for groups who are trying to do advocacy, is thinking about, okay, you know, maybe I feel confident that Councilmember O'Rourke and Councilmember Brooks will be on our side with this, or will support this, but who are the other 7 that we could maybe get on board to support? And how do we, you know, make sure we're communicating with them and showing up in other offices to talk about why it's a priority for us, whatever the ask may be. I think in terms of budget, I'll be honest, the budget process is fairly opaque. There's not always a real, it's not a very transparent process to understand, you know, whose asks are being honored. You know, we obviously have like the mayor's budget proposal that came out over the next couple weeks, will be in budget hearings, where, you know, which is council members have the opportunity to ask questions and sort of dig into the details. And there are 3 different opportunities, 3 different dates where there's opportunity for public comment during those budget hearings. But then at the end of the day, you know, we kind of narrow it down to like what our asks are, like what our big budget priorities are, and everybody sends in a list. And then council president makes some decisions, and then that's the budget that we get. So I will say that we're like really hopeful about working with Councilmember Gaudier and Councilmember Landau on a housing package. It's called Our Philly Neighborhoods, and it's meant to sort of tackle the housing crisis that I mentioned earlier, and sort of look at ways that Philadelphia, which is you know, we're already a leader in a lot of ways in tackling the housing crisis. You know, our eviction prevention program, or our eviction diversion program, I'm sorry, is, you know, like a national leader, and a national model. And we need to make that legislation permanent. And we also need to be doing more to repair people's homes, you know, in the same way that Senator Saval's Whole Home Repairs Act is meant to do, sort of like keep people who have been living in their homes for generations, who are sort of low-income homeowners, keep them in their homes. And also, you know, get some of those folks more tax relief, because our taxes really unfairly burden low-income folks. So that's something that we're excited to be working on with 2 other council members. So that's kind of a, you know, a four council member squad that we're excited to be working with. And, you know, certainly hope, you know, we have, you know, the support of folks in here around pushing that platform forward and sort of changing the narrative around, you know, what our communities deserve.
Thank you so much, Kathleen. That was quite an education on what is and may not be possible in coalition building. I wanted to highlight a question regarding development. You spoke a little bit to what the city, you spoke a little bit to what the city is doing to try and keep people in the houses they already have. We have a PNN member who is asking if it's possible to, I'm so sorry, I'm getting information from Tim and the rest of the organizers that we do need to move on, but is it okay, Kathleen, if we send some of these questions to you and perhaps you and other members of staff could answer them via email.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Thank you so much for your time. We really appreciate you being here.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. So we are now excited to introduce our next guest, someone who is a dear friend of mine, brother from another mother. Like to welcome our champion from the 200th Legislative District, State Rep Chris Rabb. Welcome.
Thank you, brother. Good to see all of your bright, shining faces on this aggressively gray day. I hope you all are doing well. I bring you greetings proverbially from Harrisburg, although I'm in presently the People's Republic of Mount Airy. But we'll be going back to Harrisburg tomorrow for our second week back after a 3-month hiatus. For those who don't know me, Rep Rabb. I represent 4 neighborhoods covering 68,000 people in Northwest Philly. And I'm in my 4th term, which oddly enough makes me the most senior progressive lawmaker in Harrisburg, which is not something I'm proud to say. We have an interesting moment now where we have a 2-vote majority in the House, and we are down by 4 in the Senate. Just like the magic number in City Council is 9, the magic number in the House is 102. It's 26 in the Senate, and we also need the signature of our esteemed governor on important bills that we seek to enact into law. But there are other numbers too. In my side of things, that number is 13. That's not a number you're familiar with. Please make sure you do, because that's the least number of votes a bill needs to get out of committee. And any bill that comes up for a vote in committee is almost certainly to pass, because majority chairs of committees are all Democrats. So they only run bills that they want to pass. If they feel that there's some waning Democratic support for a bill before it comes up for a vote, they will table the bill in committee until they know that we have at least 13 votes. Well, why is that important for this call? For all the things we care about that we have good legislation for, we have to make sure that our majority chairs run those bills. And then after they are deliberated on, voted on, out of committee, that we make sure that the majority leader runs the bills that we care about. And he's not just going to do it out of the kindness of his heart. There are hundreds and hundreds of bills to consider. How do we get the things that we care about most, whether it's reducing gun violence and common sense firearm reforms, whether it's prison reform, criminal legal reform, climate action, environmental justice. There are bills, substantive bills that address all of those issues and more, but only if we show our political might by raising hell when it matters most, to make sure that our leadership, that's the House Democratic leadership, does what it's going to do. And to me, that means that this is a uniquely pivotal moment for us who are organized and focused on justice. So between now and the end of June, there will be a lot of work ahead of us, a lot of bills coming up, making sure that the things we care about most are prioritized is important, not just because this is what we want, but also because we have a governor who wants to be president. We have a House Democratic caucus that wants to expand in November. We have unique leverage within the next month because we have a 2-vote majority before there's another special election to replace the Republican who left abruptly. So we will be going back to a 1-vote majority in the House. Well, what does that mean? When we talk about Democrats on this call, and more broadly, please understand there is a lot, it is a big tent. There are pro-fracking Democrats. There are anti-queer Democrats. There's a diversity of Democrats that I work with in the House. And that does not mean that just because they're a Democrat that they're going to vote for the bills we care about most. And we cannot rely on House Republicans to help. So what does that mean? That means that we have to advocate to House Democratic leadership and to the respective majority chairs of the bills that are going through their committee to demand that they move the things that we care about most. And why do we have unique leverage? We have unique leverage because all of us in Harrisburg who are Democrats want larger majorities or larger minority in the Senate. And we also want to make sure that our candidates win up and down the ballot. And the only way they can do that is to address the base. And when we talk about young voters, we talk about new voters, we talk about Black and brown voters, we talk about progressive voters, there's a lot of consternation about who we can entrust our votes to in this moment where there's some serious policy differences that are reaching the grassroots. So when we mobilize, we can win, but we have to make sure that we are literate enough to do the work and we leverage our knowledge of the process for mutual benefit and shared prosperity. We can do this, but we have to do it intentionally. We have to do it strategically and also in a timely fashion. The next several weeks, and I'm not talking about April 23rd, I'm talking about the time that the legislature is in session before it recesses over the summer, before it passes its budget. There is unique opportunity for us to leverage our collective power to bring them to the negotiation table and say, this is the time we need you to act like Democrats and step up. So I'm happy to facilitate civic lobbying exercises and workshops that I've done over the years. This is the work we have to do. So for those of you who are able to come to Harrisburg and be intentional in your presence and make a real difference, I'm happy to facilitate however I can. I also want to say that this is a unique moment because there is greater intentionality between progressive lawmakers in Harrisburg and our comrades in City Council. And so we are beginning to work more closely and more intentionally so that we can think of Philly and Harrisburg can think of Philly when we do our work. Onward together, folks.
Thank you, Rep Rabb. Thank you so much for those insights into the state house. I'd like to turn it over to Victoria to lead the chat question section.
Thank you so much, Representative, for being here today and addressing some of the work that you're doing in Harrisburg. I do unfortunately have to ask that your response be brief because we're running a little bit over schedule. You know how it goes. But could you name 2 or 3 of the legislative priorities that you have moving into this incredibly promising session? Is there anything that you're really paying attention to?
Well, I'm on the Judiciary Committee, which is the most active standing committee in the House. Actually, there's a bill coming up on Tuesday to create a restorative justice option for our independent judiciary. So if you're against mass incarceration and you're about redemption and accountability, then this is a bill to watch very closely. I'm shocked that it's even coming up at all, and it's my bill. But there are other things with regard to climate action, worker rights, and other prison reform measures, such as geriatric and compassionate release, so that hundreds, if not thousands, of folks who are 50 and older can have at least a early eligibility for parole because they have very low rates of recidivism, and we need them back in our communities. So those are some examples.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for being here. We do have some remaining questions in the chat that we can send on to you, and best of luck in Harrisburg.
Thanks, Chris, and thanks, Victoria. And thank you to everyone who helped put together today's event, and thanks to all of you for attending. As you heard today, there's a lot of work to be done in 2024, connecting with our neighbors, building trust, and working together on shared issues, and encouraging the disenfranchised to get involved to defend our democracy. If you've come to this meeting, you know what's at stake, and you know that now is the time to sign up and to get involved. Please take this time to look in the chat and click on the link to sign up to do your part. And we always welcome your donation to help fund our work. Be on the lookout for a follow-up email from us. It will include our speakers' answers to any questions we did not get to, as well as details on upcoming events and our election calendar. For those of you who will be joining a working group discussion today, please stay with us to select your breakout. They will be brief. The options that will appear on the screen in a few minutes. Before you select that, and even if you won't be attending a breakout session today, please go to the chat and identify for us which groups you'd like to be involved in, including participating in the primary, working on our immersive work this summer, or in the electoral work in the fall for the general election. We need your help in many different ways to hold on to and to improve our governmental system. Please be in touch to let us know your interest. Thank you.